Right. So we're going to start this panel. So welcome to the panel on advancing opportunity, equity in economics, business, and entrepreneurship. My name is David Arnold. I'm a faculty member here in the economics department at UCSD. Just to give a very brief background on myself in relation to this topic, my research studies racial disparities in the criminal justice system, in particular in understanding the role of racial discrimination in driving disparities in pretrial detention rates in the United States. I'm also a labor economist, so I'm very excited at this opportunity to discuss how to promote equity in economics and business with our list of very impressive alumni panelists today. So to start off the session, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction of each of our 5 panelists, then allow them a little bit more time to introduce themselves. So our first panelist is Chen. She's a economics major from the class of '95. She is co-founder of Mendocino Farms, as well as an investor and advisor. Next, we have Lakshadatta. He's from an economics major from the class of 2011. He's the founder and CEO of Lanshora, he is also a writer and podcaster. Our third panelist is Chao Lai, economics major from the class of '97. She's a wealth advisor for Pacific Advisors. Fourth, we have Bosco Lujan. He's a Rady School MBA graduate of the class of 2012 and a senior vice president at Morgan Stanley. Then our fifth and final panelist for this session is Ping Ye, class of 1999, as well as master's class of 2001 in mechanical engineering, and he's the CEO of Stemonics. So now I just want to give each panelist a few minutes to introduce themselves, talk about their experience at UC San Diego, broader trajectory since then, and also in particular kind of discuss what does this topic that we're going to be discussing today, advancing equity in economics, business, and entrepreneurship, mean to them specifically. So let's just go through each of our panelists. Let's start. Ellen, can you start us off? Oh, sorry, Ellen, you were muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I think this is a great topic. And, for myself, I think I've had a really interesting background in the sense that it really wasn't a linear path from what I thought I would be. If I asked myself back in college what I thought I would be, I would never have said I'd be a restaurateur. My goal was to learn about different industries. So I actually graduated, went to go work for a company called Accenture. It's a consulting company. And I think the really interesting part is in the back of my head, I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and start something on my own, but knew I had to learn from others. And as I moved along in my career from Accenture, where my first project was actually at a startup, it's now a household name. I worked at a company that I'm sure you guys have heard of, Sprint PCS. Way back when it was a technology that had just been created. And so I think the common thread throughout my career from technology consultant to marketing, and then back kind of into the technology world was every company I worked for was pretty much a startup until the very end. And the last company I worked for got acquired by Electronic Arts, which is a very large company, amazing, but very corporate. And I knew at that time that I had to leave and probably pursue something else. And fortunately, I met my business partner, now husband. He had a restaurant. I jumped in, learned the industry, became his partner, invested in his company. We sold it. And then in 2005, we created Mendocino Farms together. And it's been definitely quite the journey. And just in this last year, I've been able to exit out of the day-to-day. I remain on the board and now become an angel investor and advisor to different growth companies. And for myself, this topic is really important because as an immigrant, I think our parents came here as an immigrant, our parents came here for the American dream. And, for myself to be able to have this platform and to be able to have a company where I can help others kind of come through and really have a career versus just a job was very important to me. And, through my career in the corporate world, I had faced a lot of challenges. I think I have 2 dings on me. I'm a minority, I'm a minority and I'm female as well. And it's interesting going through that path. I think being female was more of a challenge that I faced than actually being a minority, being Asian. And so I know that the obstacles that I faced, again, once I had that platform in the company that I created, I wanted to make sure that I could take those, those challenging moments hopefully out and be able to really create kind of just a better environment for growth for everybody. So that's a little bit of my background.
Thanks so much, Ellen. So next we have Lakshdatta, who I believe he's going to be sending in a video. Does he have an introduction video, or should we go?
So,
oh, here we go.
Even though I think it's a part of my bio that I'm a writer, which means that I like everything to be pre-planned, my career is the one thing I definitely did not pre-plan, or it definitely has not felt pre-written in any way. It's going to be 10 years this year in 2021 that I've graduated from UCSD. And I finished in management science, which was part of social sciences and economics. So I immediately jumped into a finance career because I thought that was correct. I did some investment banking in San Diego, did M&A advisory. Then I jumped into teaching finance and valuation at San Diego State. Then I moved back to India because I wanted to start my own thing. Ended up starting a storytelling platform and community. Then while I was doing that, I became a writer. Then I pivoted into becoming a podcast producer and telling audio stories. And then just in these past 9 months, 10 months since the pandemic happened, I have become a voice actor without ever wanting to. I've started writing in Hindi, which was my first language technically, but I stopped studying it in 8th grade, which was many, many years ago. And I started making all these shows for an analog radio station. It's become quite popular. It's broadcasted across 36 cities all over India. So none of that was pre-planned in any way. And throughout this time, I have never really thought about the question or ever asked the question, am I allowed to do any of this? Because so much of it was me trying something out, and most of it happened without taking permission. And maybe it was because I grew up in India and always felt like an outsider when I moved to America, but I always just assumed that I'm not a part of anyone's plans for what kind of candidate they're looking for, or I wasn't waiting for someone to give me a job or asking for my opinion. And I always viewed that I got better at it, but I always viewed it as some sort of a challenge that I have to have my own voice. And that's where the writer part of me came about, that I have to be able to kind of be unignorable. And I mean, what's more unignorable than like being on the radio every day for 30 minutes? Like, they're stuck in a car, they have to listen to me now. So once I am able to get someone's attention, I feel I can say anything I want. I can talk about ideas that I believe in. I can create anything, because then I am part of the unexpected. And so for me, you know, when I think of advancing opportunity and finding equality, equal footing in your career, I think for me, it's always been about having a unique voice, a defined perspective, and then finding a way to either building or acquiring permission to build a stage to amplify your voice and your story.
Okay, so moving on to Chao, would you like to say a few things about your career and trajectory since UCSD?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And so I was class of 97 and started as any good Asian child as a pre-med at UCSD, and just was very clear that that was not really what I wanted to do with my life, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and was kind of following the path that my parents for me. And unfortunately, I had to take economics as a general ed class, and after the first week with Professor Foster in macroeconomics, the whole world opened up and made sense for me for the first time. And so I switched majors and decided I was going to dedicate my life to studying money. And I was also very fortunate. I was there on a full scholarship. And being socially awkward and shy at that point, Spent the majority of the 4 years in the library. So I started studying investing and real estate, and I was working for a good part of, my time there too, because again, I didn't know what else to do with myself. So I had money, discretionary funds that so I started investing in the stock market based on the things that I was learning. And then I started buying real estate. So I finished in 4 years, and it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do with an economics degree? My parents think I'm going to med school. So I had to break that news to them, which did not make them happy. And then it was like, what am I going to do with this degree? Because I have to make myself very successful or my parents will disown me. And I just decided, you know what? I'm really prudent with money. And if a college student can figure out how to grow money, then somebody working full time, and if they're married, they've got 2 incomes, then certainly that would make it even easier. So that was kind of the naive thinking going into the industry. And then realizing that, well, I have these grand ideas of helping people, but I still have to get past the fact that I'm in a male-dominated industry. I look like I'm 14, because our youthful appearance as Asians. and then just like really having to overcome the stereotypes and really a lot of things in my own head about what I thought I could do and couldn't do, right? And then being able to start my planning business from that. So it's been now 24 years. Ironically, I work with many physicians, helping them with their finances and business owners and entrepreneurs, and really looking at finance from a way to really be the equalizer, wherever you're starting from, right? How do you steward your what you are able to produce from your profession and actually start building real meaningful wealth for yourself and your family, and it doesn't matter where you started from, right? It's where you're at that moment, and I can take the person from where they're at and expand it from there, and that's really exciting to me. And just like the other 2 panelists have said, I didn't start UCSD thinking I was going to start a wealth management practice. I started with just a really desire to learn and to expand my capacity to think and to grow, and then just kind of trusted that the conversations that I was in different classes would open my mind, and that's what happened.
Thanks so much for sharing. Next, we have Bosco.
Hi, my name is Bosco Luján. I'm originally from Tijuana, which is the other city right across the border, which now UCSD is going to be fully connected with. I'm actually an MBA grad from the Rady School of Management, graduated in 2012. And I think the common theme here is that we all came from different backgrounds, but we all started in different careers. I actually started selling beer in New York, which is a very fun job out of college, and eventually ventured or moved into wealth management, where in order for me to, because I had an engineering undergrad from Tec de Monterrey, in order for me to transition into wealth management, I didn't know anything about finance, right? I mean, I had to learn everything. And so for me, the MBA at Rady was actually transformational, in that at that moment, I was just starting, and it was coincided also with the 08 crisis, which was a great learning. So I manage mostly ultra high net worth individuals, families, offices, and I think in the end, the common denominator that I identified throughout my career is that, I have a vocation to serve, whether it's at the Alumni board, where Kim is joining us, who's our president, Ping is part of that as well, and Chao is now part of that as well. I serve also on the Dean's Advisory Council at the Rady School as the only alum in that. So there's this vocation to serve that when you ask us about what this theme means, it actually, for me, it's more than advancing opportunity, it's accelerating opportunity. And I'm thinking everybody already read Outliers, right? The Malcolm Gladwell's book. And he talks about how back in the 1900s, Italians, Irish were the minority. and how it took them about 1 to 3 generations to get the right education, to go in and then eventually be the business owners or be the lawyers or the doctors, et cetera. What I'm seeing right now, and this is why, diversity and inclusion are so important, we're seeing an acceleration, and you don't have to look that far for that. Then, our current president and the vice president, look, the Bidens, I think, got here in the 1850s. They came from Ireland, so they were the minority back in the early 1900s. It took them a while to become president, kind of the same story as JFK. But Kamala Harris, she's a son of a first-generation migrant. So when we talk about advancing opportunity in this country, it's really accelerating. So that's why I'm excited, because it's now taking shorter generations because of institutions like UCSD that are educating individuals to empower them into key positions and into growth in their career. So this is what excites me about this topic.
Thanks so much, Bosco. So our final panelist today, Ping, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. UCSD shaped me. When I look back, it wasn't just the classroom, but much of my outside of the classroom experiences that shaped me. And after graduating, got into the tech industry, working at really as an entrepreneur in large companies like Seagate, and running global deals with Samsung and to Dell, and going from hardware to software. So it was really kind of a techie until about 8 years ago. I was diagnosed with blood cancer, and it was a difficult journey, but it was that experience that led me to create Stemonics. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Stemonics, and we're a interesting company that makes human brains and other organs for the discovery of safer and more effective medicines. So it's been an incredible journey, and I look forward to sharing more with you in this session.
All right, thanks so much. So we're going to start with some questions. This first question is addressed to all the panelists, whoever would like to respond. So have any of you felt or experienced discrimination in your business careers? And if so, how did you deal with it and overcome those hurdles? Would anyone like to start us off? Ping?
Yeah, after the last few sessions, I looked back at my life really, and realized that there were definitely some moments. I think, the few kind of events were around kind of more like ageism. I was in certain situations where I was a lot younger to do certain roles. And so, but then there was definitely some times where age became, as opposed to merit, became more of a factor. Number two, I remember there was a time where there was an investor who looked at me and said, we don't invest in first-time CEOs. And I don't know why it kind of hit me in the core, maybe. But now that I think about it, it's, if every investor had that same kind of paradigm of not investing in first-time CEOs, well, there's gonna be a lot of minorities who don't get that shot or don't get that investment. And so in looking back, definitely had those kinds of struggles. I think your other question was, part of the question was, how do you deal with it? And I think, in listening to Earl's session before this, he was told he had to work 2 times harder than, everyone else. And I think I have a similar kind of approach, work your butt off until, to prove yourself and to seize the opportunities and ask for the opportunities, even if they aren't presented to you. And that happened early in my career, where I asked to participate in certain things that ultimately, opened many other doors. So sometimes you have to, push some of those doors open. I also, number two, secondly, really push for mentors. Participating in mentorship programs was huge in my career, continue to have them, but mentoring and mentors have been a huge part of my life. And it's a reason why I love being mentors to others to pass that knowledge on. And those are a couple, but just, eventually enjoying breaking those barriers for others is something, I kind of enjoy doing now. And then, and really helping, shape a potential future for others that are in my kind of similar background.
Does anyone want to expand on Ping's answer or share their own experiences with facing discrimination?
I mean, I'll jump in. I think I mentioned earlier about being a female. For myself, I've experienced through a couple of my jobs, sexual harassment in the workplace. It's more common and I think more prevalent than most people think. For me, when I was really young, I didn't even realize really what it was until now. Looking back, I'm actually appalled by some of the things that happened. And I personally let it go because I didn't know how to address the issue at that point in time. But again, I go back to now knowing, again, being able to create a safe environment and a very open and honest environment in the own company that I built, and also talking to others, that are around me too, to say, if this happens, this is what you should do and you should not be afraid. And I think that's, really being able to help others who might be in that predicament. And that goes back to what Ping is saying about having mentors or being an advisor. I like going out there and helping others if they're, needing anything. The other one too is even during fundraising. And it's interesting because I joke that I rode the coattails of my husband because he is a white male. And so as we went through growth of Mendocino Farms, we had to raise capital. And it's interesting because even through my whole career being his partner, I was called his assistant. I was called lucky to have married someone like that. I was asked for coffee. I mean, you name it. It was just because, and I don't know, was it because I was Asian? Was it because I was female? And it's funny because, again, for the first couple of years, I just kept my mouth shut and I said, you know what, this is just common in the workplace and I'll take it. And I'll have to say afterwards, I became more vocal. I also had to educate my husband to say, hey, when you see this, you need to be my champion, right? Because again, I think for him, that was also very common and he, we went with the flow. But yeah, fundraising was definitely a challenge because they always spoke to him and did not speak to me. Yet I'm the one putting the financial models together. I'm the one responsible for that, but they would not address me. And so, it's interesting in the second round, I definitely made myself more, I made myself present versus going into the background again. And I told my husband, I will not retreat and I will be here sitting next to you. And if the meeting comes up and I'm not invited, I will show up, right? And again, that's just something that I share with now, having gone through that, now having a bigger network with a lot of PE companies and venture funds. I will tell these guys, I'll be like, hey, you know what? You guys need to stop that, right? And I'm doing it in a very polite and respectful way. But I think that's part of the reason why I have found a huge passion and now investing and advising a lot of, and it's interesting, I look back, I didn't do it, I guess, on purpose, but I see now a lot of the companies I've invested in, they're all female owned and minority owned. I would say about 85% of them. Again, I want to be there to help them as they go through these challenges, and then also create awareness so that places they normally wouldn't have access to, I'm going to provide to them because I was lucky enough to have a partner that had access to it as well. So, I think that's why this topic, and, Bosco, to what you're saying, we need to accelerate. It's not just advancing, it's accelerating because it's moving way too slow. So.
I will chime in now. So I started in wealth management when I was 21, not really knowing everything and just really going from my own experience. So first is being, not feeling not like I belong there to begin with, right? And like Ellen, I came I'm first generation, came over from Vietnam as a refugee. So always, and as my family advanced in our American dream, we found ourselves in neighborhoods that we were the only Asian family. And so I always had this complex of I don't belong here and I have to prove myself. And so now I pick an industry that is male dominated and usually older males. And I'm trying to make a name for myself. And so what I first had to do was overcome the self-talk that I was saying to myself, and just, reminding myself that I belong there. And then of course I was actually in action, building a business, learning as much as I could, getting my CFP credentials and just really equipping myself so that I personally felt like I belonged, right? And then I could be in the game mentally and psychologically. But then I also started looking for mentors, and I think that's the theme here. And now I'm a mentor myself. And so the discrimination is real, especially in our industry, because once I started I didn't even feel the discrimination as much as until I started moving up in our industry and becoming, a top 1% of advisors and going into national conferences where it's predominantly male. You're talking about advanced tax, estate planning, charitable planning concepts, and you're looking around the room and there's, 400 men and there's 10 women. So we never, so I became, and I'm usually the youngest in the room. So I just had to really, I remember the same conversations. I'd go to the conferences and they would say, someone would ask me, think that I'm an administrative assistant or somehow supporting the event and not actually an advisor there. And when I did go to the advisor producer conferences with my, my spouse at the time, they would be speaking to him even though he's not in the industry. And, so I've had all of that too. And I think that what was helpful was then finding other women in my industry who also felt like they didn't belong, right? And then we came together and we formed study groups. So we have financial advisors, female financial advisors from, all over the country that we mentored each other, and we created a support network for each other, and we became a resource for each other to remind each other, hey, we belong here. And then the other thing is, I was trained in an industry where I was trained to do the business the way a man does the business. And I was trained to not show my emotions because that's weak. And so as I progressed in my profession and I learned that my feminine voice and the way that I approach finances and the way that I engage clients, where I really help them to feel safe to be vulnerable and to share their true fears and their true dreams, and the way that I listen as a woman, that's actually my power. That's my advantage. And as I progressed, I just learned that that is what makes me unique. And that's what makes me stand out. And so embracing my voice. And so now when I mentor other female advisors who are just starting in the profession, I just remind them, your gift is your sensitivity, your ability to listen and ask questions in a way that makes people feel safe. And that is something you want to embrace. And so I'm really, I feel so honored to be in that position today, to give someone, encouragement to embrace their own feminine voice.
Thanks so much for sharing, Chao. Those were all great experiences, Ellen and Ping as well. Bosco, would you like to respond to this first question before we move on, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief. Look, I've been lucky. Growing up in Tijuana, coming here to San Diego, I could never say I've experienced anything close to what you guys have described. And I think I've just been lucky. I sold Mexican beer in New York, so I was expected to be Mexican because I'm selling Mexican beer. Then I worked at an ad agency that was multicultural, so I was valued for being multicultural. Then I went into a boutique shop that managed money for ultra high net worth Mexican individuals, so I was expected to be Mexican. What I can say actually now, and being at Morgan Stanley, I do value that Morgan Stanley has really gone all in on diversity. So all I say is that I've been lucky, and if I have experienced it, maybe I haven't noticed it. I just focus on trying to be the best of my job, regardless of what I look like. Because I think, Chao, we're in the same industry, and I also have that. I get it all the time. I look young. I have a twin brother, and he doesn't have any white hair yet. I'm actually happy that I have, because I get to look older and serve the role of the financial advisor.
All right, so thanks so much to all our panelists. We're gonna move on with some more directed individual questions now. So we're gonna start with Ellen. We touched a bit on this already, but just as an entrepreneur, investor, and advisor, what are ways in which you commit to advancing equity in your business, and why is it important to you?
No, so I think, the interesting part is I think advancing equity starts with, and Bosco, you might have mentioned this, is with education. And it really starts with how can we give back to the community. And again, I think one of the reasons why I was excited to be able to start something, and create this platform for myself was that one of the pillars of Mendocino Farms is to give back to the community. And the one thing that we really focus on is raising money for the schools in the communities that we open in. And so I do believe in how we can advance equity and inclusion is by making sure that everyone gets a good education. And so that's that's a big part of what we do at Mendocino Farms. And then I think the next part for us is how our practices in hiring. For us, we also have a very diverse background in terms of the industry that I'm in restaurants. We have all different, walks of life and different colors, and, so we make sure that in order to be able to cast that net wide enough, we don't actually just go through the regular channels like most people do when you put out job posts or hiring. Obviously we do Craigslist, we use, university, job boards, but we also then go into the communities that we know our team members are from. So we incentivize our team members to help us hire, and we give them big bonuses to help us hire and attract their friends, their families. The other ones is we go into their communities and we do things very much boots on the ground. We will go into the apartment buildings, the laundromats, the grocery stores, the bus stops, and we'll put up our postings, and we'll do it in bilingually. And we make sure that if they reach out to us, that there is someone who could actually speak Spanish and have a conversation with them. And so I think it starts again with hiring. And then once you bring them in, we want to make sure that it's not just a job. They're not just there to collect a paycheck. We really want to make sure that from a career progression, there's a true way for them to get from being an hourly team member to becoming a director to becoming a VP one day. And so what we realized was, in order for that to happen, because I felt like in my career back in the corporate world, getting a promotion, getting a raise, it was a little bit like, how did that happen? Do I just work really hard? How does that person get it? How much are they getting paid? There was not transparency. And so what we created was something we called a career climber. So it was very transparent. You knew that the minute you came in, and if you had these job skills and you could fulfill these requirements, you were, either certified at whatever level. Pay was, everyone knew how much you got paid if you were at level 1 all the way through. It was not time-based. It was completely merit-based. And it became then that transparency was very open and honest for everyone to know how they were going to progress. If they wanted to get to that next level, they just told their manager, hey, I want this. Can you help me get there? And our managers will develop and grow them. And then we put in more we put in a lot more of the process as they went through the ranks through managers and directors. But that way it allowed us to have even more of a holistic approach in terms of who was getting promoted, so that we call it base camp, which was, I guess some people will call it corporate. We knew who was coming through, and we made sure as they came through that they actually came through base camp, and we would actually interview, talk to them, and give them the tools to be able to move to the next level. And so I think that's really important in order for people to advance, because sometimes it seems so secretive, you think you don't have that shot. And so, that was some of the things that we put in place in Mendocino Farms. We still have a long ways to go. I think the hard part is the restaurant industry is a very male-dominated industry, even to this day. And when you're at that C-suite executive level, there still is, unfortunately, a lot of men who are qualified and not as many women or people of color. And so that's something we continue to work on to make sure that we're now incorporating that in our hiring practices, not only at the store level, but all the way through. And just like I mentioned, earlier, for myself personally, I've committed to investing in female-owned and minority-owned businesses and advising, and then becoming a mentor, and making sure that I'm there to support people who reach out and need help kind of going through, their career, whatever challenges they may be facing. So that's, that's the stuff that we do.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think that idea of hidden information is so important. I see it in academia so much that people don't know what to do to get accepted to the best grad schools. And once, sometimes it's too late once you give them the information. So I think, setting that up in business is so important too. So this next question is for Bosco. I would just like to know a bit more about the how diversity and inclusion play a role in your career and equity work that's being done at Morgan Stanley. And also if you could tell us about some of the, the practices and programs that Morgan Stanley has used to promote equity and best practices.
Yeah, oh, you know what? Actually, Morgan Stanley this year, traditionally it had 4 core values, right? Giving back was one of them, but they added a 5th one, which is a focus on diversity and inclusion. And because of that, they actually ended up creating an institute for diversity where they included in the board about, I think, 4 to 5 of the members of the board of directors of the actual institution of Morgan Stanley. So that tells you the level of commitment that the company has. Now, the other thing that they did recently is that they created the historically black colleges and universities scholars. And they're going to end up doing in the next 4 years 60 scholarships, which will stay in perpetuity. The firm as well has a lot of groups, and I'm involved in a couple of them at our firm. There's every region. I was part of the Pacific Coast Regional Diversity Council. I served for 2 years there. And I'm also part of the group that oversees what we call the Multicultural Employee Networking Group, where we have all kinds of events targeting different backgrounds. And what I'm proud of there is that, usually we would have Black History Month right now, or we would have, Latin American independences in September. But what I've tried to also instill is that, why don't we also celebrate German culture? Why don't we also celebrate Irish culture? So multicultural needs to be everyone. The Super Bowl happening on Sunday, it's an American cultural event. So let's embrace everyone's culture. And that's something that I've tried to do at Morgan Stanley. And personally, we're actually doing right now, we met with Dean Ordonez, who runs the Rady School of Management, and we're doing a program where we're going to provide a course, a Series 7 training course for diverse students, undergrads mostly, that travel through the Rady School of Management. I think about the statistic is 43% of undergrads take a course or two at the Rady School. So they're going to have the possibility to do a Series 7 training course in case they eventually want to go into the finance industry. So those are just some of the things that both the firm and I do individually to promote diversity and inclusion.
Thanks so much, Bosco. So this next question is for Chao. So you serve as a dedicated mentor and volunteer with many nonprofit organizations. So how does your professional role and as well as these personal passions overlap to help create access and opportunity for others? Why is this important for you?
So so I do mentor right now 6 students. All of them are in college now, but when they started with me, they were in high school, part of another nonprofit that Kim and I are involved in called Reality Changers. And we really help inner city kids with some challenged backgrounds economically, and also, from a family perspective. So I've been on my own since I was 16, and having to figure out life as a 16-year-old and figuring out, how to get education and all that as a 16-year-old was very scary. So now being able to mentor those students who always feel like they don't belong, right? And always feel like they don't know who to turn to. So I've been working with them individually. I also mentor, as I said, female advisors, because I think that our industry needs more great women who want to take on this role of helping people to feel financially secure. And I have an internship program in my business. So I've had 14 interns and, in the last 10 so years. And several of them have gone on to continue in becoming a financial advisor and or in a related field. And the majority have been females. So I'm really proud of that, being their inspiration and letting them know that finance is not just for men, right? And I say this too, I'm mentoring and coaching my female clients who are accomplished business owners, executives at high levels, and they come to me, and for some reason, when it comes to money, they feel paralyzed. They feel like they don't really understand it. This is something my husband handles, or I got divorced, and what do I do now? Because this is too complicated for me. So it's really interesting, these financial conversations that we're in as women, that I get to unravel, dissect, and then just start helping to demystify and then empower. So I would consider my clients part of my mentoring group and my coaching group. And so I really enjoy that. But I think it's important because, finance is a leveler, right? I mean, we can, as I said, I was 16. I could have been homeless if I didn't get a scholarship to study abroad, and then I didn't get a scholarship to UCSD. I didn't have a plan B, right? It was education and then figure it out from there. And I made it, right? So I always tell my clients, and I tell the students I mentor, it doesn't matter where you started from. It's what are you doing with what you have, the talents, the gifts that are natural to you, and the ones that you can learn, this new skills that you can develop, the relationships that you can develop that will help you to bridge that gap and help you to feel like you really belong, and so that you can move forward. And I think that's what I enjoy about where I'm at in my life right now, is that I get to be that inspiration for others.
Thanks so much. So our next question is for Ping. So as a CEO, how do we break down barriers for equity in entrepreneurship in particular, raise the bar for all startups to be inclusive communities?
I think for me, it starts with being as aware as possible, trying to put myself in my employees' shoes as much as possible. And that really means kind of opening up and listening, and having one-on-ones with people throughout the company, and really building bonds with them and understanding their own personal journey and how they've gotten to be at Stemonics. And I think in listening about their experiences and about the events the last several years, you get a feel for what they're experiencing, whether it's being fearful of, as a biotech company, we have a lot of scientists that, were not born in the United States. And, they would share things like, am I going to get stopped, for my papers to see if I'm, a citizen, and are they going to, take me away? There was definitely real fear of the team that I have in San Diego. And I think it really made it very real for me. And so I think the first step is, listening, and putting yourself in their shoes, if you will. I think for me, another approach that I have is, as this relates to entrepreneurship, I actually look for struggle. And I think for startups and, the work that we do, Ellen was talking about, I'm sure, startups not easy. There's a lot of ups and downs. And in some ways, the struggle that I look for that struggle because, if they get through it and learn from it and become a stronger person from it, it becomes really like their superpower, if you will. And that gives them kind of this, another ability to get through the challenges, especially in the startup world. So I would definitely say that. And I think what I learned at this conference so far is really at all levels, we have to own the fact that we're in our sphere as CEOs or executives, our spheres of influence, and own that kind of responsibility. And I think that really became clear for me in listening to the last session. So for us, it can be as subtle as, we say this very often. We say things like, a good idea can come from anywhere. And I didn't realize how inclusive that was until I kind of thought about it, because it doesn't matter, the color of your skin, what country you came from. A good idea, what degree, do you have a PhD, or do you have a bachelor's, or do you have a master's? It doesn't matter. A good idea can come from anywhere. And I think statements like that can really help build an inclusive culture and environment. And then, of course, as you can all imagine, the events of the last several years as CEO, taking on the having to speak about these in our all hands meetings, or I'll have to, I will email out to all the employees of what are our core values and why are they important to us. And I think that's really important for our employees to hear, and just kind of owning that responsibility.
Definitely. Thanks so much. So our final individual question before we break out into rooms and you can ask our panelists questions that you've had as we've gone through these is for Laksha. And so this will be a video, but the question is, how has your startup fostered community and a culture of inclusivity? From your point of view, what does equity, diversity, and inclusion mean from a global perspective? So, there we go.
So when I started Launchora, my company, which today is it's a storytelling platform community and a narrative podcast company, I started in 2014, and I had no experience building a platform. I had no idea what to do, but I had that confidence and naivete that comes with being 24 years old. So I had a lot of assumptions about who my audience was going to be. I had a lot of assumptions about what gender ratio there would be. I thought, it would represent what the internet is. I thought it would be mostly amateur writers like me looking to share their work and possibly, end up making some money somehow. And I realized immediately, basically, that my assumptions were wrong, because I was assuming things from the outside in terms of kind of using some sort of judgment of people and what kind of creative path or journey they want to create for themselves. And I learned pretty much within the first 6 months that I was wrong about all my assumptions. Ended up having a 70-30 female to male ratio. Most of the users were non-English speaking, from countries where English wasn't the first language, even though they wrote in English. Almost everyone was under the age of 25. I think 90% of my users were under the age of 25. And I started seeing this pattern where they were not using the features I was building, I had pre-built for them, but they were really liking some features. So I started asking them questions, and I realized that I needed to build things that they wanted to use, that they wanted to express their creativity. And then I started seeing stories from their lives come out. I thought primarily I would be a fiction platform. And then they started talking about what they're going through because they're teenagers and young adults. A lot of experiences about going through heartbreak and first love and puberty and anxiety, and in some cases depression and other mental health issues. And that's when I realized that I just had to let them be. I just had to make them feel safe in terms of the design and the features. I just had to let them know that this is a place to share anything, instead of asking them to fit into a pattern or a pigeonhole. And when I think about it, reading someone's words, or now that I'm into audio, listening to someone's story, you're now looking from the inside out. You're seeing people as who they are. And in time, what has happened is that I've learned, and then because they've taught me, and I've tried to apply that into my entrepreneurship skill set, is that instead of creating sympathy for a stranger thousands of miles away, I'm now able to, because of this community that I was able to be a part of in starting, I'm now able to create empathy for a fellow human being who, despite being thousands of miles away, is now only one click of a button away for me and for the rest of the community. And now, 6.5 years into it, the entire community is a platform, website, app, is all community run. They feel ownership. They create the guidelines. They make sure that we're catching trolls and bullies whenever they show up, and which has been very easy to avoid because bullies and trolls usually aren't pouring their heart out in poetry, and that's what a lot of the platform ends up doing. So they've created that, and I've outgrown the platform. I'm too old to use it. I'm 31 now, and they don't like what I do, so I just make audio content for them now. And it came to me that this, for example, I had this feature called the Garage, and it's this feature that was built on the concept that everyone is a work in progress. All stories are a work in progress. So the motto of the feature was stories get better with help. So instead of, let's say, you're someone from America who has some experience in writing, you come across a story written by a young 14-year-old girl from a small town in India who is trying to write in English but is not so good, but her ideas are good. Instead of writing a comment that you need to learn better English, that person can admit that they need help with their writing, post it on the Garage section, and you can now give them positive feedback. Instead of coming from a place of, I don't like what you're saying, I don't approve of this quality, you can help raise their quality. And I personally believe, that the first draft of anything is not really going to be good. And it's wrong of us to compare someone else's finished draft to our first draft. It really doesn't help build confidence, and whatever part of you that wanted to become a storyteller and share with the world kind of dies a little bit if you get discouraged. So I wanted to build a community, and I think that's what I feel most proud of, where the goal is to become better storytellers and eventually better human beings, but as a collective, so we're rising together.
All right, so that is the end of our individual questions. We went a little bit longer than we planned to, so there's going to be a little bit change in format. We're no longer going to do the breakout rooms. We're just going to answer a few of the questions that came through the chat. And so here's our first question from chat. So there are hidden discriminations when it comes to age. What are ways and resources you recommend that mid-career professionals can become involved and reach out for new opportunities?
I can take that one. At some point I was in, at some point you keep proving yourself and you get the bigger project or more responsibility. Sometimes you might hit that ceiling, and sometimes you need to go to an organization that recognizes, the skills and capabilities and talents, that you can bring. And so sometimes it's finding and seeking out a situation that will recognize those.
Do any of our other of our panelists would like to answer this question?
I'll say real quick that I've always advised people that I've interacted with, whether it's people that I'm a mentor to, it's that you always have to worry about two things. You want to make sure that you're learning something new in what you're doing every day, or you're enjoying the process, and that you're growing. I think that's very important, that you're always growing. If you don't have either, I mean, you can wait a little bit, or you have to kind of look to the side and find a place where you can learn something new, grow, or where you're really enjoying the process, and that'll make you grow along within itself.
Okay. So given that we're approaching the deadline, I'm just going to ask each panelist here if they want to make a final statement or a final call to action before we close out the session. Does anyone want to jump in first? It can be as simple.
I don't mind. I think there are a lot of struggles in life, and I think we heard a lot of them today. But I think what I learned from my fellow panelists is that my takeaway is, you control your own beliefs on a situation, and you can take a situation as a thing, but your interpretation of that can either pull you down or lift you up based on your beliefs on that situation. So I would suggest, or as I learned from my fellow panelists, taking those opportunities to, on an individual level, to make that change, make that the future that you want to see, whether it's telling your husband, like Ellen did, hey, this is the way, if you could do it this way, it will help. Or, so I do think the interpretation and controlling your beliefs and your mindset is going to be really key to getting through some of the struggles.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, Ping, is that we all have a choice in how we respond to life circumstances and changes. And it's in the response that gives us our power or takes it away, right? We can choose to see something as an obstacle that we can't overcome, or we can choose to see it as an opportunity to grow and to learn something new and to stretch ourselves in ways that we didn't know was possible and lean in, right? So, and the choice is ours. And I think that's the key there, is that we can talk about, social, cultural constructs that are real, and they can make things challenging for us, but we can make it impossible for ourselves if we choose to. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, I'm sure that in this group, there are very successful, accomplished professionals. And just to remember that you have an opportunity to turn around and help somebody else, and to remember that what it was like to feel like you didn't belong, to feel like the beginner and the first time CEO who, is not really sure what you're doing, right? Like, we've all been beginners at some point. And so we all have an opportunity to, stretch our hands out and say, I understand where you're at, and I see, your greatness, I see your potential, and I want to come alongside you and help you. And that's the benefit and privilege of being successful.
I'll kind of just, jump on kind of what you're saying is, I think it's important that we continue to have this conversation. And I find myself, and I'll use the female, how to lift females. A lot of the time, the conversation happens in a bubble, and it's women getting together and having that conversation. And my belief is that if we want to lift and make this bigger, we need to incorporate, other people into this dialogue and have this conversation with others and educate them on why it's so important. It can't just be a struggle of minorities or with women. It's got to be to the other, to the other groups as well, and make sure that they understand that this needs to be done together collectively, because we can be frustrated, we can have these conversations, but if the other side doesn't change, that change and that momentum is not going to happen as quickly. And so I think for myself, being where I'm at and having access to larger companies who are trying to move forward, but might not have everyone in the same mindset. I'm more vocal, and I bring that up to them, and I throw things out for them to at least to start to noodle and think about. And my biggest thing to a lot of men, I say to them is, would you want your daughter to be facing the adversities that I'm facing or that your mother faced? Put yourself in that shoe, and think about how you would want to make that change for your kids, in this next generation.
David, I'll be very brief. Look, I grew up in Mexico, where we didn't know white, yellow, brown, whatever. We just grew up as Mexican. And what I like about this country is that there's all these cultures. And I think that's kind of where we have to go. I think I would encourage others to do exactly what Xiao, Ping, Ellen, and most people in this panel have done. They have just beat the system by being great at what they do, regardless of, cultures, background. Xiao is a self-made financial advisor. Ping is a cancer surviving CEO. Ellen is a wonderful entrepreneur that now is mentoring other entrepreneurs. They beat the system just by being the best at what they do. I think that's the best thing that we can all do, so that others can see what other cultures are bringing into this world and the value that we're adding. That's the best thing that we can do. So that was my takeaway today, and we have it in front of us as great testimonies. Even Kimberly, that's here, is another good example.
But I will add real quick, Bosco, that there's no way I could have gotten here without the support of family, friends, and mentors that opened up the opportunity and access of information of how to do certain things. And so I think if you can pay it forward, and so go on Try and Connect, right? And pay it forward to the students who I'm sure all of us have had mentors who've, guided us in many ways. And if you can pay it forward, I think, and help others like we've been helped, that would be tremendous help too.
So thanks so much to all our panelists today. We're about to bring this session to a close. Please join me in a virtual round of applause for our panelists for sharing all their insights on this incredibly important conversation. Just a few final housekeeping things. We are going to put up slides about this, and we look forward to seeing everyone at this virtual networking opportunity. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Arnold.
Thank you.
You can call me David.
Thank you, guys. This was amazing.
Thanks.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Arnold.
Oh, thank you.
Sharing your experiences.